They called her the little girl who never grew up. But behind that glittering smile, Judy Garland was living a nightmare scripted not by fate, but by Hollywood itself. Before she turned 18, she had already sung her way into the hearts of millions as Dorothy in The Wizard of Oz. Yet the real tornado was waiting behind the studio doors. A storm of control, addiction, and despair that would haunt her for the rest of her life. On screen, she was America's sweetheart. Off-screen, she was a prisoner of an image she never chose. MGM executives dictated her every move, what she ate, when she slept, even how much she smiled. Pills to wake her up, pills to make her sleep. And when her fragile heart began to collapse under the weight of it all, they told her, "You're replaceable." The same voice that once sang, "Somewhere Over the Rainbow," would later whisper through trembling lips, "I just want to be loved." But Hollywood doesn't love, it consumes. And Judy Garland became one of its most tragic offerings. In the end, the girl who dreamed of a world beyond the rainbow would die alone in a London bathroom. Her body weakened, her spirit exhausted, and her dream finally silenced. Yet even today her voice still lingers, raw, haunting, eternal, echoing through every broken dream that fame has ever destroyed. This is not just the story of Judy Garland. It's the story of what happens when the dream factory devours its brightest creation. In the late 1930s, America was a country yearning for hope. The Great Depression had crushed dreams, families were rebuilding, and cinema had become the great escape. Hollywood was the golden city, shimmering lights, endless fame, and the promise that any ordinary girl could become extraordinary. Judy Garland was that girl. Born Frances Ethel Gumm in 1922, she began performing on stage with her sisters before she was 10. Her voice, deep and soulful beyond her years, caught the attention of MGM, the most powerful studio in the world at that time. They signed her before she even understood what fame meant. At MGM, everything was about control. The studio system of the 1930s and 40s wasn't just a workplace, it was a kingdom. Actors were property. Image was everything. And for young Judy, that image had to be carefully engineered. She wasn't the elegant beauty like Lana Turner or Ava Gardner. She was the girl next door. And that label came with a price. Executives called her too fat. They ordered strict diets, cigarette suppressants, and amphetamines to keep her energy high. Between filming schedules, Judy was trapped in a loop of exhaustion and performance, forced to smile, sing, and pretend to be happy while her real life slowly dissolved. Behind the curtains, she was isolated. Every meal was monitored. Every friendship was filtered through the studio's approval. When she cried, the cameras rolled. When she broke down, they called it temperamental. She was a child, but MGM saw her as an investment, a product. The irony was cruel. The very film that made her immortal, The Wizard of Oz, also became the blueprint of her suffering. The ruby slippers she wore on screen symbolized freedom and wonder, but off-screen they were shackles made of gold. As she sang about going over the rainbow, Judy Garland was already trapped beneath one, crushed by the impossible beauty and perfection that Hollywood demanded. The world adored Dorothy Gale. But Judy Garland? She was slowly fading behind the Technicolor illusion. And soon that illusion would begin to crack. When The Wizard of Oz premiered in 1939, Judy Garland became a sensation overnight. Audiences across America fell in love with her trembling voice and innocent eyes. That moment, her singing Somewhere Over the Rainbow became one of the most iconic in film history. The world saw a miracle, but Judy saw a cage. MGM quickly capitalized on her fame. They turned her into their golden child. Starring in musicals like Babes in Arms, Meet Me in St. Louis, and Easter Parade. On screen she glowed with joy. Behind the scenes she was collapsing. Sleep-deprived, overworked, and constantly medicated, she became dependent on the pills the studio supplied. The same amphetamines that helped her perform would later destroy her health. Her mother, Ethel Gumm, was no refuge. She was often accused of being complicit, pushing Judy to perform even when she could barely stand. Some who worked with them called her the real stage mother from hell. Judy herself once said bitterly, she was the real Wicked Witch of the West. As Judy grew older, the studio's control turned crueler. Executives feared she was losing her youthful charm, so they humiliated her, calling her ugly, comparing her to thinner co-stars, demanding reshoots when her face looked too tired. Her self-esteem crumbled. She would later confess that she couldn't look in the mirror without hearing those voices. In 1947, after collapsing on set, MGM suspended her. Publicly, they called it exhaustion. Privately, they knew the truth. Their brightest star was breaking. Yet Judy kept fighting. Her return in A Star is Born 1954 was nothing short of resurrection. A role that mirrored her own life so eerily it was almost prophetic. The film's theme, a woman sacrificed by fame, felt like a confession disguised as cinema. Critics hailed her performance as too real to be acting. But the triumph didn't last. When she lost the Oscar for A Star is Born, she wept in her hospital bed, watching the ceremony from afar. Hollywood had used her pain for art, and then left her behind once more. By the late 1950s, her finances were in ruins. Her marriages, 5 in total, had become cycles of passion and betrayal. Yet through every downfall she sang. Concerts became her refuge, her way of fighting back against the silence. In 1961 at Carnegie Hall, she performed the show of her life. Critics called it the greatest night in show business history. For 2 hours, Judy Garland was not broken. She was reborn. The audience screaming her name as if trying to save her. But it wouldn't be enough. Not to silence the demons. Not to escape the pills. And not to stop the tragedy that was waiting quietly just over the rainbow. By the mid-1960s, Judy Garland was no longer the radiant star who once lit up the golden age of Hollywood. She was exhausted, frail, and haunted by the system that had built and broken her. The same studios that once called her America's little girl now treated her as a liability. Unreliable, unstable, too emotional to ensure. What the public didn't see was that Judy's downfall wasn't about fame alone, it was about control. From her teenage years, the machinery of Hollywood had manipulated every corner of her existence. Her body, her mind, even her sense of self. The little girl who could sing was turned into a product, then discarded when she no longer fit the mold. Her dependence on pills had become an anchor she couldn't lift. What began as a studio-enforced routine, stimulants to work, sedatives to sleep, had become her only means to function. She had no control over when she was awake or when she collapsed. In interviews, her voice trembled as she tried to explain. "They took my childhood away. They took everything that made me feel real." Her marriages reflected the same pattern, moments of love that always ended in abandonment. Her third husband, Sid Luft, tried to manage her career but often clashed with her over finances and control. When their relationship ended, Judy's trust in everyone, including herself, was shattered. By 1969, she was living in London, performing in small nightclubs, her once brilliant voice now trembling but still magnetic. Audiences came not just to hear her sing but to witness her fight. Every song sounded like a plea, every note a confession. But behind those brief moments on stage, her life was unraveling. Friends spoke of her despair, her exhaustion, her inability to sleep. She had debts, lawsuits, and nowhere to turn. The woman who had once embodied the dream of Hollywood was now living proof of its darkest side. On June 22, 1969, Judy Garland was found dead in the bathroom of her rented house in London. She was 47 years old. The coroner's report listed the cause as an accidental overdose of barbiturates. But for those who knew her, it wasn't an accident. It was the slow, inevitable consequence of a lifetime under the control of others. When news of her death broke, the world mourned. Thousands gathered outside the funeral home in New York. Many wept not just for Judy, but for what she represented. Innocence destroyed by the dream machine. Even decades later, her death remains a symbol of Hollywood's cruelty and the human cost of perfection. One journalist wrote, "Judy Garland didn't die of drugs. She died of heartbreak." And maybe that's the real truth, not the medical cause, not the scandal, but the unbearable loneliness of a woman who gave the world everything, yet never received what she needed most: peace. There's something deeply unsettling about Judy Garland's story, not just because of how she died, but because of how predictable it all was. Her downfall wasn't a sudden tragedy. It was a slow, deliberate erosion of a soul. The studios didn't kill her. They simply built a world where she couldn't survive without them. Hollywood in Judy's time was a machine built on illusion. Stars weren't people, they were symbols. Their pain was edited out of the frame, their flaws erased with lighting and makeup. But Judy's gift was different, too raw, too human to stay hidden behind a smile. She wasn't just performing emotion. She was living it. And that made her both extraordinary and expendable. Every note she sang carried a tremor of real hurt. You can hear it in The Man That Got Away or Over the Rainbow, that fragile mixture of hope and heartbreak. It's what made her immortal, and what destroyed her. Because once the audience learns to love you for your pain, they expect you to keep suffering for them. The system around her, her managers, her studios, even some of the people closest to her, fed off her vulnerability. They called it show business, but it was something closer to sacrifice. Judy Garland was the altar, and fame was the god. And yet, it's impossible not to admire her resilience. Every time she fell, she found a way to rise again. Even when her body was failing, even when the tabloids mocked her. Her 1961 Carnegie Hall concert proved it. When the lights hit her face and the music began, she didn't just perform. She reclaimed herself. For that moment she was free. What happened to Judy Garland is an ancient history. The same pressures, the same exploitation still echo through modern celebrity culture. We just disguise it better now with PR teams, social media filters, and wellness breaks. But the machine is the same, and it still feeds on people's insecurities, dreams, and need to be loved. Maybe that's why Judy's story still feels so personal, because in her voice we hear the cost of wanting too much from the world. She reminds us that talent alone doesn't save you, and that fame can be the most beautiful form of destruction. Her legacy isn't just about her songs or her films. It's about the question she leaves behind. How much of yourself are you willing to lose for the dream? There's a certain sadness that lingers whenever Judy Garland's voice plays, like a ghost that never left the stage. It's the sound of someone who gave everything, yet never found what she was promised. Every time she sang Somewhere Over the Rainbow, she wasn't chasing a fantasy. She was begging the world to let her rest. In her final years, the applause grew quieter, the room smaller, but the connection deeper. People didn't come to see a flawless star. They came to see a woman who still stood, trembling but unbroken, after everything had been taken from her. And somehow, in that vulnerability, she was more powerful than ever. When she died, the curtain didn't fall. It simply dimmed. The light she carried never really faded. It just changed form. Her laughter, her tears, her songs, they became part of the great fabric of cinema's memory, echoing through generations who never met her, yet feel as if they knew her. Because Judy Garland was never just Dorothy or Esther Blodgett, or the girl with the golden voice. She was every artist who dreamed too big, every soul who chased love through the noise of applause, every heart that broke beneath the weight of perfection. Hollywood may have written the script for her destruction, but Judy gave it meaning. She turned pain into melody, despair into beauty, and left behind a truth that no studio could ever polish away. Somewhere beyond the lights and headlines, there is a quiet place where Judy finally found peace. No cameras, no contracts, just silence. And maybe if we listen closely, we can still hear her voice, soft, distant, but eternal, whispering to all who come after her. Dream, but don't let the dream own you. Some stories are never revealed. But now you know.